The Fancast spread like wildfire. Social threads poured with edits, AI renderings, fan trailers, close-ups of his piercing blue eyes. The kind of eyes that don't need dialogue to disturb you. His cheekbones casting shadows sharper than most scripts. His voice, when it finally breaks the silence, low and clipped, like it has somewhere darker to go. Fans weren't joking. They weren't trying to be outrageous. They meant it, and when Cillian Murphy was finally asked the question directly about being Fancast as he who must not be named, the answer he gave wasn't dramatic, or sarcastic, or dismissive. His answer was deeply, profoundly respectful. But to understand why it was so powerful, we have to understand Cillian first, not the actor in the spotlight, the man behind it. He's not like most stars. Fame for him has always been the price, not the prize. He doesn't live in Hollywood. He avoids social media. And he chooses his roles not based on potential franchises or box office appeal, but based on how true they feel. How deep they dare to go. To fans, that makes him magnetic. To directors, it makes him irreplaceable, time and time again. He's chosen roles that blur the line between villain and victim. Thomas Shelby in Peaky Blinders, walking through grief with a cigarette and a revolver. Dr. Crane in Batman Begins, wearing a mask more terrifying than the fear it creates. And of course, Robert Oppenheimer, man with the mind of a god and the heart of a broken fighter. Each performance surgical, subtle, seductive. So, when fans began imagining him as Voldemort, the dark heartbeat of the Harry Potter universe felt right. Not because he could copy what came before, but because he could redefine it, because of how restrained his danger feels, because all his villains are layered with regret, history, fatigue. That's what people wanted in their Voldemort, not CGI spectacle, not reptilian theatrics, but humanity, the kind that makes evil harder to look away from. But when Cillian Murphy was asked the question in an interview, not as a headline, but as a genuine moment, he didn't laugh. He didn't shrug it off. He paused, and then he said something no one expected. Ralph Fiennes was magnificent. That's all he said at first. But the way he said them softly, with reverence, you understood instantly. This wasn't a role to be conquered. This was a crown already worn with dignity. Murphy spoke, not as someone jealous or dismissive, but as someone who understands what it means to live inside a role so fully that it never quite leaves you. He continued on, not about himself, but about Fiennes. He built Voldemort from the ground up, made something operatic, terrifying, poetic. There's nothing I could offer that would be better, only different. And maybe it doesn't need to be different. It wasn't a deflection. It was grace. Because in an industry obsessed with reboots, with possession, with tearing the past down to build something newer and louder, Murphy chose instead to speak with honor, to admire, to protect what came before. That choice is rare, especially in someone who could have easily turned the moment into a trending headline. And yet, in that brief moment, Cillian revealed not just humility, but an understanding of legacy that goes beyond ego. But perhaps that's no surprise. You see, Murphy understands what it means to take on a character with historical weight. He carried Oppenheimer. He sharpened Tommy Shelby. He crept into Jonathan Crane's quiet madness long before most superheroes were dark. And in each of those roles, he never approached the character with arrogance, only with service. It's why directors trust him, why fans believe him. Because he never tries to steal the scene. He tries to find the soul in it. So yes, let's indulge the fantasy for a second. Imagine him in that scene. The orphanage in the rain. A young Tom Riddle staring into the camera, smiling without warmth. Now imagine that boy grown elegant, but with pain just beneath the surface. Murphy could carry that. The loss, the hatred, The fear disguised as power, but he chooses not to, not because he couldn't, but because he respects the story too much to hijack it, and that tells you everything you need to know about who Cillian Murphy really is. In an era filled with actors rushing to grab legacy roles, chasing relevance through characters they didn't birth, Cillian stands still. He chooses silence over spectacle, strength over spotlight, reverence over reinvention, and maybe that's what makes people want him in the role even more. Because Voldemort was always about power. And Cillian Murphy has it. The kind that doesn't even need to raise its voice. There's a kind of magic in hearing an actor speak kindly, not about themselves, but about the work, about the truth transmuted through performance. So when he said Fiennes was magnificent, it wasn't just a compliment, it was a passing of the wand. He reminded us that not every great actor needs to wear the mask. Some are powerful enough to take it off and simply say, "There's nothing I could add that would make it better." And that might be the most Voldemort thing of all, knowing you could and choosing not to, because sometimes restraint is the greatest act of power. So the next time you see a fan-sourced fancast online, black robes, pale skin, piercing eyes, dramatic text over AI renderings, remember the man behind the mystery. Cillian Murphy is not chasing roles, he's chasing meaning, and in a world desperate for the next thing, the next face, the next version, he stood still and simply said he was magnificent, and that was enough. It's one thing to decline a role, it's another thing entirely to do it with such quiet dignity that you make people love you even more for saying no. Cillian Murphy didn't shut the door on the idea of Voldemort with arrogance. He shut it like you'd close a library book after the final chapter, acknowledging what came before, admiring how it ended, choosing not to rewrite the words just to see how it might sound with your voice. And that, more than anything, is why the idea keeps living in our minds. Because a man like Voldemort, an idea so closely tethered to the story of evil, of trauma, of choice, needs to be more than just powerful. He needs to be believable, and Cillian has a mastery over pain, the kind that doesn't explode on screen but simmers beneath it. His villains are never loud. They're never animated. They don't need to be. They haunt. And in some twisted, poetic way, isn't that what Voldemort always was? He wasn't the monster hiding under the bed. He was the bed, the room, the shadow on the wall that flickered just before you turned around, the echo of something broken and forgotten, but still watching. So it's no surprise that fans continue to reimagine Voldemort with Murphy's face, or his voice, or even just his silence. Because Voldemort isn't just about the power to destroy, he's about what happens when someone refuses to love again. When that refusal eats away everything else. Say, and who plays emotional erosion better than Cillian Murphy? He has always been a study in unraveling. From the slow burn of a tortured thief in Inception, to a post-apocalyptic survivor in 28 Days Later, to a lonely physicist in Sunshine, suffocating under light. Murphy doesn't perform suffering. He embodies it. And that's why so many believe he could wear the Dark Lord's skin. Because in the moments after the spell is cast, when the dust settles and tragedy echoes, that's when Murphy thrives. But here's the catch. Murphy knows that, and he still chose to stay out of it. Not because he feared it, but because he respects legacy in a way most in Hollywood have forgotten how. In his calm reply, he didn't just compliment Ralph Fiennes, he framed Fiennes, Voldemort, as sacred. He built Voldemort from the ground up, Murphy said, like a craftsman admiring another artist's sculpture, not wanting to touch it out of fear the clay might crumble. That humility isn't weakness, it's wisdom. In fact, One of the most powerful traits Murphy brings to every interview is a genuine lack of hunger. Not for fame, not for fortune, not even for fan-made fantasy. He doesn't want to be everywhere. He just wants the work to speak. In an age when actors race each other for superhero suits, post bait on social media for attention, or flirt with every trending hashtag attached to a reboot, Murphy stays quiet. And ironically, that silence is louder than any casting announcement. It's not that he wouldn't make a great Voldemort, it's that he doesn't need to. We, the audience, sometimes forget that actors aren't chess pieces to move into different games. They're people, artists, paintbrushes, not just mural fillers. And Cillian Murphy will only paint when he believes in the wall. That's what elevates him from actor to artisan. But still, it makes you wonder, had the stars aligned, had there been a version of Voldemort, yet untouched by portrayal, could Cillian have carried that burden? Almost certainly. You can picture it, can't you? No slits for nostrils. No snakes twirling at his feet. Just pure presence. Cold, quiet. A thin-lipped whisper that makes every bone in your body freeze. There is no good and evil, only power. How that line would sound, sinking from his mouth, almost sad, almost tired, it's chilling to imagine. But even more powerful to know, he wouldn't force it. And in saying what he did, Murphy gave something rare in Hollywood: graceful restraint. He's not chasing Voldemort. He's bowing to a story that was already told, and in an industry obsessed with more. That's an answer that says everything. More isn't always better. Sometimes the most generous thing an actor can do for the fans, for the legacy, for themselves, is not to leap at the offer, but to say, with sincerity, he was magnificent. To step back and let admiration do the talking. To let Voldemort remain as he was, not because it couldn't be done differently, but because sometimes, if you really love a story, you leave it alone.